It's hard because as we compare ourselves to other people and say things like, well, they were just in the business 1 year. How is it that they were able to sell 10 million? They've only been in the business 2 years. How is it that they were able to sell 20 million? And I've been in the game now 5 years, and I'm still in the same cycle of wondering where my next deal's coming from. Welcome to another episode of Mindset Mastery. I'm your host, Araujo. Go ahead and check on in as you're coming on board. And I got to tell you, what a great weekend Carla and I had. And it's one of these things where we were able to really just connect. And we had such a good time. We went on a date on Saturday, and it was just amazing, the conversations that we have. Really paying attention and being in the moment with each other. Knowing that our road, knowing our path to redemption, the path to doing the right things, and then seeing the results of that, being patient enough to be able to see the results of that. And there was a time where we couldn't even go on a date by ourselves. We just felt uncomfortable. We had so much resentment. We had so many other stories in our minds that we just couldn't do those things, right? We'd be bored. Or if we did do those things, we would have to be drinking to have a good time together. And oftentimes that also took on the shape of bringing other people with us, or always having dates as couples with other people, right? Or with just friends. And I think it was a way for us to escape all the many problems that we had. And in a way, it also an attempt to bond us for the things that we didn't have, right? If we could pinpoint or point out things that other people within that conversation or with that evening were doing, it takes the focus off of what we need to do as a couple, right? Always like pinpointing where they're not up to par or how they spoke to each other. It was like this almost like gossip fest afterwards for Carla and I. I think a lot of couples do that, right? Where they go out as a way to be able to just see what others are doing, as opposed to really just focusing on their own growth and expansion. So we couldn't do that for a very long time. We just didn't know each other. And if we did, like I said, it always involved alcohol. And, part of this process is to get to know our behaviors, get to know what we truly want in life and where we're falling short. And it requires wisdom. It requires awareness. And that's what redemption is all about. Redemption is about not necessarily avoiding mistakes because they're inevitable. It's about what you do after the mistakes that really counts. Because as we started looking at the entire dynamic of our union, we realized it was much bigger than what we anticipated. It was much bigger than we could ever imagine. And the impact now is bigger, like I said. And again, we had to really be in a position where we had the courage to cut certain individuals out of our lives and really just focus on ourselves. And I think that's the key component to where you want to go, is to spend that time by yourself, is to spend your time looking at your own behaviors and the dysfunctions that come along with it. And many times we're not aware of what is going on or why we have the results we have. And there's this agent within our organization that I always joke with, right? And the joke is like, hey, you were able to figure it out just in time, right? Where one way or another, he's able to generate the leads that he needs in order to keep himself from sinking, right? He'll let things kind of build on themselves, right? Where maybe he's lax about doing certain things because, well, there's money in the bank account. So because he's gotten away with it before, right, where he didn't necessarily have to market, where he didn't necessarily have to do the actions, and he still saw some of the results, he didn't correlate it that those results were based on what he did before, the action that he took before. So you might get away with not marketing today. You might get away with not connecting today. You might get away with so many things, but it doesn't mean that that's going to happen long term. At some point, you're going to have to pay the piper. You will have to pay for the consequences of not being attentive, of not taking the appropriate actions. And it seems like, we fall into this space where we just allow things or avoid things until, the water, right? It's like, I see it as a slow motion train wreck or like this flood that's, rising up. And we know we should be like swimming towards higher ground. We know we should be taking action, but we're like, well, it's not so bad. I can still breathe. I mean, my head's still above water. And we just distract ourselves. Or we put all our attentions on someone else. Maybe it's our spouse who's not doing enough to contribute to the family, right? That's what we say, but we don't really take responsibility and say, what are we doing to put our family in a better situation? What am I doing, right? And I'm all about extreme ownership, about full responsibility, about leading my family. But when we're distracted, we're pointing at someone else. Look what you're not doing. Look what you haven't done. Look how hard I work, right? Like this entitlement. And we start veering into this victim mindset that I'm never respected around here. I'm never, appreciated. And oftentimes that comes when you've slowed down on your production, right? So we allow the water, the flood, right, of bad results, essentially, of just sitting there, rise up until you're like up to your nose with it, right? And every time you breathe, you take up a little water and you get a little anxious, but you don't understand how you got yourself in that position again. And then at that point, you're like, okay, I better do something about it. But the problem is you wait until it gets there time and time again. And what we don't realize is that the impact that it puts on your family, on your overall sense of purpose and confidence, what it does to your kids, like we disregard all that. And we're like, well, now I have to go out and make things happen. And just in time, you were able to figure out just in time. And it's like, that's a broken record. That's a way that you have to avoid, because there is no growth there. It's just enough to get you from sinking. That's all it is. And for me, it's about how far can I push this? How much more can I create? And at the end of the day, it's like we have to be aware of why we continue to replay the same record over and over again. And like I said, you may have convinced yourself that if you don't market today, it's not going to impact you. If you don't return calls right away, it's okay. If you don't, reach out and text people, it's all right. You still have money in the bank. As a matter of fact, there's a false sense of security because maybe your spouse is the bread maker. So you don't really have to push the envelope. And we'll make excuses like, well, and I've heard this many, many times before, I'm a family man, AZ, I want to be there for my family. And almost insinuating that I'm not. And my challenge is you can do all things at a high level. Why does it have to be one or the other? Because when you have a business and you fall short of producing what you know you can produce, it starts wearing on your certainty, on your confidence. You start becoming this person that becomes a spectator versus an action taker. And for me, that's in a place where you start eroding everything that you've actually created. And, a while back, I remember about, just thinking about expansion. And I had one of my coaches tell me, or say this to the group one time, that we are under the false impression that expansion is only one way, right? That if I do the right things moving forward, things will get better in the future. And yes, expansion does do that. But one of the things is that he mentioned was that expansion colors always. What I mean by that is that when you do the right things, it not only colors the future, it also colors the present, but also the past. It colors always. So you start growing and start redeeming yourself for all the things that you didn't do. You start like chipping down at the negativity that used to wear on you, or the guilt and the shame that used to carry. Like when you start doing the right things today and moving forward, it starts coloring always the past, present, and future. Like everything is changed. And we're under the false impression that we can't change the past. I'm going to challenge you. Not to accept that. Because as you grow today, you'll start changing your past, the past relationships. You can't change how certain people felt about it, but you can begin to change the perspective of who you are today, that you're not the same person, that maybe let them down. You're not the same person that maybe lied to them. And that's the beauty of redemption. That is, if you do the right things today and moving forward, you can change all ways. So that we're not in that same situation where we're like, just in time. I was able to figure it out just in time. No, you have it figured out. You just have to be in a position where you can embrace this new level of responsibility because, yes, it's taxing for the current person you are right now. But it's the bare minimum of the person you can be. And as we start counting down the final days of the first 2 quarters, the first 6 months of 2023, understand that you have 6 full months to redeem yourself of what you can create. And I've seen it time and time again where as you start doing the right things, it starts morphing into this unstoppable train, right? As opposed to looking at it from a slow motion train wreck, it becomes like this unstoppable machine of production. And I've seen it time and time again where doing the right things and having faith that if you do the right things, you will inevitably get the right outcomes. Like that's the hardest thing, right? Because you want things right now. It's hard because as we compare ourselves to other people and say things like, well, they were just in the business 1 year. How is it that they were able to sell 10 million? They've only been in the business 2 years. How is it that they were able to sell 20 million? And I've been in the game now 5 years, and I'm still in the same cycle of wondering where my next deal's coming from. And it's a challenge to your thought processes that you will have to pay the piper for your lack of effort. Because the results are always a byproduct of your commitment to do the right things day in and day out. My date with my wife, going on 20 years, is the byproduct of my commitment to show up each and every day. But before that, I had to redeem myself. I had to stop lying. I had to stop blaming. And if you're in a place right now where you're riddled with anxiety because you don't know where your next deal is from, challenge what got you there. Not trying to look for a solution. Challenge the story of what got you there. And many of us pray for a solution. God, give me the answers. Give me this. What do I have to do now? It's like, pray for the wisdom to be able to pinpoint the actions that got you there. It didn't happen by chance. It was a step at a time, a day at a time, towards the things that you didn't want, towards the results you don't desire. Very much like everything that you do want and everything you do desire is taking the right step in the right direction day in and day out. And just because you got away with it the first time or a handful of times doesn't mean that you'll avoid paying the piper. Mark my words. Mark my words. Your day is coming. And you will be exposed. Just like I was. And it seems like when we make one decision, one bad decision, one challenge, it's like, why don't we pivot? Why aren't we praying for the wisdom to understand that I can change the dynamic of this situation right here, right now? But because we got away with it for so long, we don't correlate it. And that was my thought process back in 2008, right? As my financial situation's imploding, I made things worse because I got away with it for so long. Going out with people I shouldn't be going out with, compromising my relationship, compromising my business. But I've gotten away with it for so long. What's the worst that can happen? And as I'm getting into my car, I've done it so many times. As a matter of fact, I've drank even more. I've been more buzzed. and still got behind the wheel. And it becomes like this what used to be a gray area just becomes a normality, right? Like what used to be wrong now is like, well, maybe it's not so wrong, right? We like push the parameters of what is right and what is wrong. Because, well, we've gotten away with it so long. We haven't had to pay the consequences. At least not at that magnitude. Until you're faced with foreclosure. You're faced with divorce papers. You're faced with the consequences of the law. And at some point, you will have to pay the piper. And I got to tell you, I've messed a lot of things up in my life. But I was never able to pivot at the moment I had to. I was never able to make the right choices when I made a few bad ones. It's like I went all in with the bad choices. So as I'm walking out of this restaurant, I decided to do what I've done many, many times before. But my disobedience costed me. And, get pulled over. And next thing you know, I'm like in jail for DUI. And it was a low point in my life just because I put myself there. Having this awareness, right? It's almost like an ignorance. I know what is right and wrong. You know what is right and wrong for your business. You know what is right and wrong on the way you talk to your spouse and your kids. But yet we continue to do the same things because we've gotten away with it for so long. And yet so many people are surprised when they do receive the divorce papers, right? Or they walk into their house and their spouse has left. It's like, how did this happen? Well, you've gotten away with it for so long, you thought it was normal. But you will pay the piper. And the results that you see others obtain is the byproduct of doing the right things day in and day out. And listen, there's always exceptions to the rules. There's always those that skip a few steps and on their path to the top. It seems like they have an elevator, right? But at some point, everything that they disregarded, everything that they avoided will come back full circle. They will have to pay the piper. They will be exposed. And I can say I was on that trajectory as well. As soon as I got into the industry, it seems like I got all the green lights. As Matthew McConaughey would say, right? All the green lights. But there was a lot of things that I avoided. There's a lot of lessons that I didn't learn. So guess what? I'm going to have to learn those at some point. The problem with that is learning the same lesson over and over and over again. That's a dysfunction. And then we become a prisoner of our outcomes, right? And what happens at that point? We're disenfranchised. Who are we? What are we about? Is this all we can create? Loss of confidence creates dangerous situations. It destabilizes the home. It disenfranchises you as a person. It's one of those things where we have to understand that it was many, many steps that get us there. And as I started looking back at my progression, I was like, oh, I had one drink and I drove. The next time I had 2 drinks and I drove, and then 3, and then before you know it, it was a normality. You have a few drinks, you drive. And I'm so happy, like I didn't kill others, I didn't kill myself, I didn't hurt others. Man, I can't really say that I didn't hurt others because I know it put a lot of pressure in our marriage. It was just one more thing on top of all the other things. And I shouldn't have been out there. Now, I shouldn't have been out there. I have a family. What was I doing? But that also became normal. Being around people that I wasn't supposed to be around with. That opens you up for another poor decision, right? It opens you up for another poor decision. It's like if all you surround yourself with is people that don't understand what it takes to build a business, that's one bad decision, you not doing what the minimum requirement is, followed by another poor decision, which is to be around those that don't understand or seeking advice from those individuals when they have no idea how big your goal is or your vision is. And your disobedience will cost you. And there's this quote that Jermaine and I were talking about, and he said something very, very interesting. He says, if you offer value by being obedient and disciplined, the money will follow. If you offer value by being obedient and disciplined, the money will follow. It's a divine order of what God wants you to do. And there is no misinterpreting that. There's a divine order on what you must do. But again, when you cross the lines, it becomes gray. When you cross the lines, this dysfunction becomes normal, that you don't know what to do until it gets really, really bad. And somehow you were able to figure out just in time. And life doesn't have to be that way. And I have to tell you, I've messed up a lot. I've messed up massively. But I came to realize, and I had faith that just the same way I ended up in that situation where everything was on the line now, my marriage, my career, my overall self-confidence, I was abusing the heck out of my body. I wasn't connected with my daughters. But how I got there was a progression, a step at a time, right? That I had to have the same faith and the same discipline to do all the right things. And I realized I had to take one battle at a time. Fighting off temptation, one battle at a time. Fighting off complacency and mediocrity, one step at a time. And just showing up over and over again, regardless of the outcome. Was it a good day? Was it a bad day? Was it a bad situation? Was it a good situation? Was it a win where I've closed the most deals? Where I've had the most profitable months? It's taking the next step to doing the right thing, not sitting there celebrating or looking for reprieve. I've rested too much. I've rested on my laurels too much. I do not need any more reprieve. I need to take the next step. What's at the next level? Bring it to me. And then realizing I got to interpret the challenges that are coming my way as something made to build me, not to break me, not to discourage me, and say this is not the path for me. But it was fighting off temptation, complacency, mediocrity, one step at a time, and redeeming myself. I reconciled my relationships. I restored order in my home. I returned to the person that I was supposed to be. I now had a new sense of purpose and drive because I focused on building me. And when I started feeling good about myself, I started giving good things to everyone around me. I no longer was a prisoner of my own inactions. I was like the captain of my soul. And when you're disobedient to the responsibilities you have, and this includes in your marriage and your business, guys, when you're disobedient to the things you must do, it will cost you in a massive way. And again, you may have gotten away with it, but it's going to cost you. And mark my words, when you get exposed, it's going to hurt to the core. And you're destabilizing every aspect of your house, of your life. You can't go one more day apologizing. One more day, it's not going to happen again. Sorry, kids, I forgot. Don't worry, I promised it'll happen again next time. Well, that's what you said the time before. What do you think that's doing for the relationship? And it's not about acting like you were blindsided by your outcomes. Like, you know how you got there. Just like I know how I got my marriage back to where it needs to be, and even not even back, just greater. And going on 20 years, spending this time and still talking like we have so much more to do. Like our conversation on Saturday was so impactful. Our time together was so amazing. And what you'll notice about expansion is that what you think is growth is a fraction of what actually it can be, right? Because you start comprehending there's always new levels to everything. It's not like there's only one level to average, one level to success. It's like there's many, many layers on top of that. And I'm determined to win in all aspects of the game, of life. And having faith that it will work for you, that's the hardest part, guys. And you might be in this place where you're just waking up every day with no real direction, where you're just waking up like, is it ever going to happen? And I got to tell you this, it will if you do the right things today. If you stop seeking this shiny object to help you, to save you, if you stop seeking for someone to give you a handout or their hand to pull you up, it's not going to happen that way. Because no one knows your situation. No one knows how disobedient you've been. You only know. So you have to fight this battle on your own. But if you have the right tools and the right environment, you'll get reinvigorated to go to this battle day in and day out. So what is it about your marketing that you have to do today? What conversations do you have to do today? What kind of communicator, what kind of marketer do you have to be today to put you on the path of growth and expansion? Because there is room for redemption, and it begins today. And I got this last thing here. There's this section in the 12-week target books. We went from affirmations to declarations, right? And I think that's a more powerful word than just affirming something. It's declaring it, like this is going to happen. There is no going back. When you declare something, it's like you're all in with it, right? When you declare war, you're all in. It's not like, well, I'm affirming that we're going to war. No, it's like I'm declaring it. And it's a war on your thought process, your war on your current actions or inactions, the war of just being in this place of mediocrity and complacency. And I wrote down and we have to declare, what is it that you want? What is it that you need to do? And my most powerful messages have always come when I've directed my mind and focused on something that I want to obtain or create, give it an end goal, right? And today, it's just like many days, I just write down and to remind myself of who I am, of declaring who I am. And today I put down, I am a great communicator. I will focus on delivering a powerful message. I will impact lives today. My value and my perspectives will change those to battle their complacency. No one does it better. I will have the right words, the right tone. My message will be heard. What are you declaring today? Because we all are on this path of redemption, so we need to get after it. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Mindset Mastery. Have a great day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye now. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Badass Agents Podcast, brought to you by AZ & Associates and Do the Work Coaching and Consulting. You can watch this and other episodes by subscribing to our channel on YouTube or by visiting us directly at badassagents.com. And of course, you can listen to this episode and many others on your preferred podcast provider.